Hey everybody, this is Mr. Hamblin here again with another source for you. We're going to continue to analyze Pocahontas, specifically John Smith's perspective of meeting Pocahontas. And instead of looking at sourcing, we're actually going to look at corroboration this time. Corroboration is one of those other skills that we're going to be looking at. And you might notice that we have two skills right now, and not only that, I'm on the right side, on the top, hiding our awesome social media. But I wanted to show two of the sources at the same time just because it's just a little bit easier to compare and contrast things when you see both. So real quick, I'm just going to show you how this is going to work. We have the two sources, obviously, and then also what I'm going to do is click back and show you the actual four skills. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this for all the videos or not. For now, for sure, I'm going to do it for this one just because when we're comparing and contrasting, it's a little easier to actually show you what I'm writing. Not only that, I can't write on both with my little green pen anymore. So I'm just going to do it this way. I'm sorry in advance, the typing might sound a little bit annoying, but for now, this is how we're going to do it. So I'm going to jump back up here, look at the two sources. You might recognize the one on the left. It's called A True Relation, John Smith. It is the one that we did those 7 skills with for sourcing. And the next one over here on the right side is actually called General History of Virginia by John Smith. So both are written by him. Both are about the same moment, about the account of meeting Pocahontas and this idea or this myth of him being saved by Pocahontas. If you're familiar with the Disney movie, you remember the part where John Smith's going to be executed and Pocahontas jumps upon him and tries to save him. And it might be fun to think that, oh, we did that. Modern day people made that story fictional. But in reality, we'll find out and that was not the truth. John Smith did a very big fiction himself. So, looking at these two sources, we're going to jump in. I'm going to go ahead and look at our 4 skills. Remember, I'll be jumping back between screens, so don't be too distracted by me. First skill is listed similarities and differences between the two sources. So when we're doing corroboration, that basically means we're comparing and contrasting. And right now we're looking at 2 sources, both by the same author, John Smith. And just looking real quickly, we're going to mostly focus on this right one for now, because we already read the first one from 1608. So that one's not so bad. Let's go ahead and look at this other one real fast. I'm going to adjust my camera real quick so I know what I'm doing. I'm going to scroll down past this picture. This is just source information right now, kind of like what we did last time, looking at the source information. We can see that it's from 1624 instead. So, oh, I do have my green pen. Yes! This is so much better. I'll still type, but my green pen works. That's good to know. Anyway, back to it. 1624, so kind of in your heads figure out what's the difference between 1624 and 1608. And that's how many years he wrote these 2 different stories. We can see that this second source is a general history of Virginia. Interesting. So this is going to be for somebody else. So again, these are similarities and differences I'm already kind of figuring out. And so just from looking at the source information, I'm going to go ahead and just jump into it. We can see that, and I'm going to say the 1608 source just to save time. The 1608 source was a journal, and the 1624 source was a history. Looks like a history book. And if you find any misspellings, congratulations, you get a cookie. Not from me, from your teacher or somebody else. So, the 1608 source was a journal, and the 1624 source was a history book. That's good information for us to know. I already gave them the title, the years are different, and that's also excellent information to know. Let's go ahead and look at the source itself. So I'm going to scroll down, I'll bring back our old source, looking at True Relation. Again, we've already read through it once. If you want to read through it again, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to focus on the one that's new from 1624. So, first, at last, they brought him, Smith, to Meron-Momoko. Sorry again if I butchered that. Where was Powhatan, their emperor? 2 great stones were brought up for Powhatan. Then as many as could lay hands on him, being Smith, dragged him to them, and thereon laid his head, and being ready with their clubs to beat out his brains. It's really gruesome. So right here already very different, I would say. So let's go back to our notes. If you remember from the first one was positive. Let's see, the first one was positive, and the second is violent. So that in itself is a very big difference in tone. The first one, everyone's friendly with each other. Remember, The guys for Pocahontas, or the guys who are sent back with John Smith, were like carrying his stuff. Like they even gave him an extra buddy who was not even carrying anything. He was just helping John Smith along his way by being a friend. In this one, they're grabbing him, they're laying him down, they have clubs, they're going to beat out his brains. I mean, I'll underline that. Like, what a quote. I honestly can't believe that's even in like a history from the 1620s. It's such a violent thing and such a different contrast. Not only that, all of a sudden, Pocahontas is back. Let's write that one down. Pocahontas is mentioned. Is mentioned in the 1624 version. That's a big deal. That's really important. So I wrote down that she's mentioned in the 1624 version. She has a very clear role. She is, looks like saving him. She got his head into his arms, laid her own upon his to save him from death, whereat the emperor was contented he should live. So what a difference, right? Even here, Pocahontas has a much more major role. And if you watch the movie, that sounds just like the scene. He's about to be executed. She saves him. So that's interesting. We understand now where this movie is coming from. We understand where the myth is now coming from. That Pocahontas was a Native American woman who saved John Smith's life. Now, continuing to go through, we can look at the bottom. The 2 days after, Pocahontas, having disguised himself in the most fearfulest manner he could, caused Captain Smith to be brought forth to a great house in the woods. So again, a little bit different, disguised himself in the most fearfulest manner. Even though in the other source they were talking about, so I brought up the other source just real quick, even though they were mentioning that they were very well dressed and there was a lot of men there, so that might have been kind of seen as being scary. He doesn't mention it. He mentions it being mostly a positive experience, but now here again, to give evidence to my old claim, he's being more fearful. Or the Native Americans are trying to be more scary, and lack of a better word. So continuing down, we're talking about the end where Pocahontas actually sends John Smith away. It sounds very much worse. They're talking about guns now and a grindstone, so no longer are they talking about the hatchet and the copper. Talking about something completely different. And he basically talks about him being sent away, but Pocahontas at the end will allow John Smith to become his son. So that's the source. 2 paragraphs instead of 3. That's one little difference you can see. We only focus on differences. Let me focus on some similarities right now. So some similarities, the same people are being mentioned. Yeah, I'll put Smith and Pocahontas. Trade is coming back, although it is different items. And when I say trade, what I'm looking at right now is this grindstone and guns. Very different. Guns are clearly a weapon. You can say that they're a tool too to hunt, but for the most part, guns can be obviously used for both ways. So this is very different as far as trade's concerned, even though trade is still a big part of it. Not only that, we no longer really see John Smith focusing on the positives of the Native American people. Also, he doesn't mention jewelry at all, too, so I can mention that. He doesn't mention jewelry. I know I didn't really say very long on our similarities, but it's always easier to see. Why does my M not work? There we go. So, let's see, jewelry, no longer mentioned. Yeah, my M does not want to work right now. There we go. So, these are the similarities and differences that I can quickly see. Obviously, there's a lot more. Just for the sake of time, though, I'm not going to go through them all, just because I'm reading and typing at the same time. It is interesting to see how different something is, though, between 1608 and 1624. Written by the same person, it makes us question, why are you doing this, John Smith? And if you're going to source this document, like I'm making my students source this document, you are going to notice quite a few differences, and it'll be interesting like what you come up with as far as who is his audience, what's the purpose of this. It is really fascinating stuff. So, jumping back into the actual corroboration, though, comparing and contrasting, let's look at number 2 real quick. Identify the different characteristics, bias, or perspectives of the source's creators. Here's something interesting. It's the same creator. John Smith's the same guy, just a little bit older. And we could look at our old sourcing and figure out, okay, well, John Smith, we remember he's a white Christian man from England, focusing on trade, focusing on the relationships of Native American people. His bias is most likely trying to convince people to come to the Virginia area to settle. That's what he really wants to do. This is a history book, though. This is very different. People have already come to Virginia now. This is many years later. So he's now telling a very different story. He's no longer saying how friendly everyone is. Even though he still mentions trade, the trade's different. The trade is they want guns instead, which is a lot scarier, I think, as far as if you were colonizing. So going through this real quick, let's look at the differences of younger John Smith and older John Smith. John Smith, we'll call him 2.0, no longer... God, I need a new keyboard. No longer seems to care about making the Native Americans look... I really wish my keyboard would work. Friendly. There we go. Okay. Fix my awesome grammar. So he no longer wants to look friendly. The trade items are different. That's a big one. Let's see. What are some other differences in characteristics or bias? Similarities we can go with really quickly. Oh, I realize I don't have difference. I only have differences in there. I need to also write similarities. So I'll fix that real quick. Okay, similarities and differences. What else do we have? I know I missed about that. Whatever. Not a big deal. It's the same guy. I'm going to say that. I think that's worth it. The same person is writing both accounts. That's an important thing to know. That tells us that he's the same person. So his characteristics aren't going to really change. His perspective definitely is different, though. He's writing from history now. He is trying to remember the events in 1608 in his 1624 version. So he's trying to remember. He's trying to recount on how many things are different. So those are some different characteristics and bias that I can see. Again, just trying to go through this quickly. Number 3, use the source to question, disprove, or confirm a historical belief or fact. That's a good one. So basically, can we use one of these sources to disprove the other? Here's the big issue I see with that. They're both primary sources. One's a better primary source than the other. The 1608 version's better because he wrote it roughly around the same time that the event happened. The 1624 version happened much later. Not only that, if we look at both sources, they're clearly different. The same event is described so differently, it's hard to trust really either one. How do we know the first one wasn't a lie and the second one was? If the first one was a sales pitch to get people to come to the New World, then yeah, he would not have mentioned this very scary scene. However, if his history book is trying to do something else, like make money or make John Smith feel good about himself by being a great adventurer, then he would try to spice up his story a little bit. So it's really hard to tell. Both sources kind of discount each other. So we can't say one source is better than the other right now. Both sources have their problems. The only thing that we could actually do is look at more primary sources. So because of that issue, on number 3, I'm going to say both sources disprove each other and make us question what really happened when John Smith met Pocahontas. Well, my M key wants to work all of a sudden. That's nice. So that's an acceptable answer. However, you would have to back it up with evidence. So I can even write here evidence to remind you. You cannot just write these basic answers. It's kind of like showing your work in math. I need to see the actual problem solved. I need you to show me where your rationale is, especially if you're going to say we don't know. Even though that's an acceptable answer, you have to show me why that's an acceptable answer. And what I just talked about would be a perfect example. So I wrote my answer. I wrote down evidence to remind you that you would need to do that too. Let's go ahead and look at number 4. Rejected or accepted a source based on analysis of another source. So this kind of goes along with number 3, can we disprove an historical idea? I'm saying we can. We don't really know what happened during that event based off these two sources. Can we accept a source with these? Yes, we could. Say that we had another source. Say another source from somebody who was with John Smith. Maybe Pocahontas wrote some letters or a diary. We could use those diaries, use those letters, use those sources to figure out where the truth is. Right now, we only have one guy, John Smith. We need more information. So, can we reject or accept these sources? So it says specifically, rejected or accepted a source based on analysis of another source. The truth is, we cannot reject or accept either source without more information from someone else. My M key is still being terrible. Okay. So that's the real truth behind it. You'd have to analyze it. And normally when I'm giving these kind of corroborations, these compare and contrast, number 4, that number 4 skill, I would give you a third source. Then you would have to explain yourself. So just to kind of show you what that would look like, if I scroll down, I'll use the left hand right now. So I'm using the one that is 1608. If I keep scrolling, I'm going to scroll past the 1624 source, and I'm going to land on the thing that says The American Dream of Captain John Smith, J.A. Leo LeMay. He is an historian, LeMay is, and he wrote a book called The American Dream of Captain John Smith. He wrote a history about John Smith, and he talks about whether or not we can really trust John Smith's story. I'll even read it right here. It says, no one in Smith's day ever expressed doubt about the episode, and many persons who must have known the truth, including John Rolfe, Pocahontas, her sister, and brother-in-law, were in London in 1616 when Smith publicized the story in a letter to the Queen. As for the exact nature of the event, it seems probable that Smith was being ritualistically killed. Reborn, he was adopted into the tribe with Pocahontas as his sponsor. But Smith, of course, did not realize the nature of the initiation ceremony. So J. Lee LeMay is using another source to confirm reject John Smith's story. LeMay knows that the tribe that Pocahontas came from used these kind of theatrical moments to initiate someone into the tribe. They ritualistically killed John Smith. This is kind of similar to watching a play on Jesus Christ being crucified. We're not actually killing somebody, it's a ritual. It's something that we watch to see in order to connect us to something, and in this case, religion. So these are all something that LeMay must have known beforehand. He's able to reject John Smith's book based off the fact that he understands something much deeper. He has context. And it kind of makes sense. If you look, let's go back to the actual source. I'll go scroll up to this old John Smith one. I'll use this one on the right now. John Smith's was named after, so Pocahontas named John Smith and gave him a Native American name and called him his son. So these are all ways that LeMay is able to basically back up his claim. So that's corroboration in a nutshell. It is complicated. It is hard to compare and contrast two things together. Don't worry about it so much. Just continue to try to master the first skills and then develop yourself as you go. So that's going to be all for today. Have a great day. Take care.